The 2026 NFL draft has concluded, so we're going to go over the best drafts from this past year. Matthew, who do you have as being the best?
There's actually a lot of options, I feel like here. A lot of people had a lot of really good drafts. This is racking my brain because I can't fathom that this is possible, but the best overall draft I feel like has to go to the Browns. They addressed a lot of needs and got a lot of value for it. They started off the draft pretty solidly with Spencer Fano, addresses their O line needs. And then they took Casey Concepcion at 24, which I was pretty skeptical about. But they got the guy I wanted them to get, and they went back to back on wide receiver like the Broncos did with Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler a couple years ago, and got Denzel Boston. And then they go get a guy in Emmanuel McNeil Warren, who was a first round talent. I think that's a steal. And the rest of their draft is solid. I like Joe Royer from Cincinnati, Justin Jefferson from Alabama. I will say an interesting pick here, though, is Taylor Green out of Arkansas in the sixth. Maybe we don't need to load up that quarterback room all that much, but even still, I feel like he's a different type of quarterback, and he brings something different to the room that, honestly, if they like what he brings and they like that style of offense, I could see him being the starter in Cleveland.
Okay, I
But I could
can't
see
see that,
anyone. Yeah.
but I know that you're really high on him. You know what I will say though is I think I could see him in some like short yardage gadget
Well, yeah.
plays because they don't really trust whoever's out there starting. They did
Yeah.
answer that they weren't going to trade Dylan Gabriel, I believe. So yeah, that quarterback room's a little bit of a mess. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It probably in anybody's grades brought them from an A plus to an A minus, but regardless, they're an A for me. I completely agree. I don't want to double dip too much because you said plenty of great stuff, but they definitely were one of the top draft classes from this past, or they just got a lot of value and a lot of guys, and they got their positions of need. We'll see how it ends up turning out, but the Jets were another team that I had really high, and I know you agree as well. They took some swings. They got Kenyon Sadiq, and they got some other guys who were probably more solid, and they had good value. So, like, I felt like Omar Cooper Jr., D'Angelo Pons were really, really good, solid value picks, and they were positions of need. And then obviously David Bailey, it's tough to mess that one up, and they got their pick, and they got their guy at number 2. They chose production over potential. Then they, as I mentioned earlier, they got their potential later on. I felt like it was a solid draft for the Jets. Jets and Browns here to start.
Who can believe it? Who can believe it?
Shocking, really.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Jets fans I was seeing were really upset with how the first round was going with Bailey and then Sadiq. The Sadiq pick was a little questionable, but then to get the guy who you were mocked to get at 16 at 30, I think that's pretty good value. And then again, D'Angelo Pods, I think he's a pretty solid pickup. So yeah, I'd agree. Another team that I like here is the Bucks. I think the Bucks kept hitting like all night, all draft on steals. They start off the draft, Ruben Bain, no matter what, and they get their guy at 15. This dude is like, he started the cycle like top 5 potentially. Well, maybe that's a little too much. Let's say top 8. To still get him at 16, it's insane. And then Josiah Trotter in the second. Ted Hurst is a guy I think is sneaky good. And Keontae Scott from Miami, you're teaming up the teammates. I think it's a really solid draft. Not as many players as some of the other drafts on this list. 7, which is, I guess, like the average number. I know Browns definitely got more, I think. But it's still a solid class.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, as a Bucks fan, it's music to my ears, and as somebody familiar with the Miami players, I felt like it was great. Keontae Scott was an actual like beast for Miami last year. He was really good, and his best game came against Ohio State last year too. So I felt like all those picks were good, and don't overthink it. Take the guy who just fell to you. They made a great work of the draft. The other team is the Raiders. They got the top guy in the draft, obviously with Fernando Mendoza. But after that, I felt like they made some good picks of positions of need. I also do think Trey Zune isn't bad. I know he kind of got whooped by the Miami D line in the playoff, but like he's not bad at all. That Texas A&M O line was really good all year, and he's a good player. They got him in the third. I felt like that was a decent pick, and then they ended up getting Jamal McCoy. Somebody had to take a swing, and the Raiders felt like they could do it. And if he's a player that works out in the future, if he's remotely healthy, like whatsoever,
Yeah.
they won
Yeah.
with that pick. They got him in the fourth. I mean, this is a guy who would have been mid first round had he not had his knee injury. There's always going to be guys like that every year. So I think giving them the benefit of the doubt, took a swing when it was valuable to do so. They did good, and they also kept a lot of their picks as well. So they're bringing in a pretty sizable class, and I felt like just overall what they did was really good.
Yeah. I started day 3 and I'm like, where is McCoy gonna go?
Yeah.
Because we had him mocked to 20 to the Cowboys, which in hindsight was probably a little ridiculous.
We didn't know how much teams would be concerned with his knee,
Yeah,
though.
and they were really concerned. But for him to be the first pick in day 3 and then to the Raiders, I was pretty upset. But even a lot of their day 3 picks are really like Mike Washington going to them in
Mhm.
the fourth. That's a solid get up for them. So yeah, I really like their class. I don't feel good about it, but I like their class. Another team I want to give a little shout out to. Not my favorite class, but I think we can't not mention the Giants here. Arvell Reese at 5, and then Francis Mauigoa at 10, and Colton Hood in the second round. It's a solid get, but then you look at the rest of the draft and it's just not as strong. I will say though, I do like Jack Kelly in the 6th round. I think he is a linebacker who flies around the field. And maybe this is the right spot for him, but still, I think it's a pretty good get.
I also think the Giants were graded on a bit of a curve, like acquiring the 10th pick.
Mhm.
I like their draft too at the very top. Those first 3 picks, in my opinion, are absolutely knock it out of the park. I'm not a huge fan of Malachi Fields. Like, I just don't know what he is at the next level. But I would agree, like overall, it's a little top heavy, but they still made it out and they were one of the better drafts.
Yeah. And then finally, my final pick here has to be the Cowboys. They doubled down on defense in the first round, and oh my gosh, I cannot believe they got away with Caleb Downs at 11. That is insane to me, and I think a lot of teams in that division are going to live to regret that. And then Malachi Lawrence at 23. He was a guy who I honestly didn't think would be here, but I don't hate it. I think that if you like a guy, you need to go get him. Yeah.
I was just gonna say something really quick. I think overall, when we look at past drafts, we can point out guys that leading up to the draft, maybe their positional value wasn't super high. It's not a position priority for every single team, but you just can point them out and be like, yeah, that's a guy who could be a 5-time Pro Bowler. Like, there are guys like that every year, and they do just fall because they're at a position where it just feels like it's not as big of a difference maker, or just teams want to take swings for whatever reason. Caleb Downs is 11 there for the Cowboys, and that just makes your entire draft, in my opinion, because I do think he is one of those players that you could just look at and be like, okay, yeah, we could pencil you in if you're healthy for at least 5 years of elite football in the NFL.